Hi my angels, it's Hailey Reese, and today's video is going to be super fun and exciting for me because for those of you who aren't new to my channel, you know that I love doing nothing more than reading through some spooky Reddit stories, especially from Reddit No Sleep, in my spare time. I think there are so many talented and gifted writers on Reddit, and sometimes I come across a story and I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to react to this on camera with the Reese's Pieces. So today, we are going to be reacting to a story that's titled just pulled me in the minute I saw it, and that is My Family Has Been Tormented by an Entity for 7 months. Like, how spooky does that sound? So without further ado, I think we better just dive right on into it. It's kind of a long one, and I just really want to get into it and share my opinion. So let's get into this. My family has been tormented by an entity for 7 months. Or rather, I have been tormented by an entity for 7 months. I tried telling my husband about it once. I was relieved to later find out this entity didn't seem to be after them. At least that meant I didn't have to see the look on his face when I told him about it. To be fair, I would have thought I was crazy too, and I did not want to affect my marriage in any kind of way. After all, Nicholas and I had only been together for 2 years and were still in love like we were teenagers. We got married a few months after we found out I was pregnant. The ceremony was beautiful. I was wearing a custom-made dress, which was very expensive. My mother had insisted on me wearing her old wedding dress, but since I was pregnant, my big belly did not fit into it anymore. I didn't mind. It was quite an old-fashioned dress, and it swallowed my whole figure. The dress I had chosen was perfect. I felt like a princess. Another few months later, Drew was born. He was a beautiful, healthy baby boy who already had quite a lot of hair for a newborn. It must have been my husband's Hispanic genes that made him that lucky. I finally had everything I had ever dreamed of, so I wasn't about to have it taken away from me. I didn't know what it wanted from me. Many people around me had claimed to know. I had visited countless psychics and paranormal investigators. All they ever did was take my money, make some vague statements, and leave. One lady even started yelling at me, claiming that she couldn't help me, that this entity was far too strong for her to mess with, before running out of my house. That's how I learned never pay up front. It would show up in a different body every time, but it wasn't like possession. Once it had gotten to know a living being well enough, it would be able to make an identical copy of its own. Most of the times, however, it was just a small insect, sitting at the top corner of my living room, watching us. Most of the people I had visited claimed it was here to learn, and its end goal was to take the form of one of us. This was most likely to be my son, since he was only 2 years old and still had a long life ahead of him. Once an entity had learned enough to permanently inhabit a body, the possibilities to kill and torture the people around it were endless. That is so spooky. The only way to get rid of it was to destroy the physical body it was currently inhabiting to a far enough point where it wasn't able to travel any further. It would eventually die out, not being able to leave its current body and no longer being able to use it. But no matter how many times I chased it down, it was always faster than me, and it had been here for too long now. It became harder and harder to recognize it. It knew too much about my husband and my child. It had learned to impersonate them almost perfectly. We needed to leave before it learned too much. Okay, first of all, that really freaks me out. Just the concept of an entity learning too much about your husband or your child and being able to present itself like them. But let's continue. That's why I had pretended not to notice when the entity started to take the form of my little boy a few weeks ago. It was a smart move, I must say. I would never be able to lay a hand on my boy without being absolutely positive. That's why it was the only way to do it. I went upstairs to take Drew out of his crib. This wasn't my boy, though. Drew had been at my mother's place for 3 days. I had told her I would explain later, that she wasn't allowed to talk about it to anyone, and it would be dangerous. I pretended to pace around the living room in distress for hours, fake calling neighbors, police, until I was lucky enough to find my baby in our guest room playing with my makeup. My husband didn't even notice the switch up. Every morning when I woke up, he was already at work, and he'd be home just in time for dinner every day. I knew that it wasn't my baby though, and I was about to be certain. It was a big risk. but I knew my way around, and I knew we would be able to get to the hospital in time in case of an emergency. So when I took it downstairs, I fed it a strawberry. A single strawberry would become lethal for my boy within 2 hours. This was just an empty vessel though, controlled by evil. Only the real Drew would be able to have an allergic reaction, and this would be proof that the boy with me wasn't my son. And so the plan had started. I immediately called my husband and told him he needed to come home, that it was an emergency. When he got home, I told him to get in the car and not ask any questions. I told him that my mother would meet us halfway and that I was going to hand Drew to her just to make sure he was safe. I would only have a few minutes to destroy the body and get back into the car with Nico. He would drive us to our mother's house, where her and our little boy would be waiting for us. Then I would burst into tears and tell them the tragic "my ex-boyfriend still stalks me" story I had rehearsed in my head over 100 times. It would give everyone a reason not to call the police. After all, we didn't want anything to happen to Drew. Before we left, I made sure every door and window in the house was locked. About 2 hours after we were gone, the house would tragically burn down due to an oven that wasn't turned off properly. Everything in the house would burn to ashes, and I would be free of any proof. First instinct was to blame it on my stalker, but I needed to keep the police as far away as possible, so it would just be a simple accident and a reason to never go back to that house again. I would tell my family to never talk about it to anyone, and they would listen to me. We loved and trusted each other. With the small amount of residents living in our village, the chances of someone making a call to the fire station and the fire being extinguished in time were very slim, and if I got it right, every trace that might have led to us would be burned to the ground. After about half an hour we were on the road, I held Drew's body close to me, cradled like it was my son, and sang the sweetest little songs that my baby always loved. Except for the traffic noises outside, this was the only thing we heard for hours. I had told my husband to be silent, not to ask me any questions. It was all going to be okay in a few hours. We were on the road for 2 hours before I told him to park at the station, where I had told him my mother would meet me. "I'm going to bring him to Deborah, okay, baby?" I said. He nodded. He was visibly upset and impatient. I would have to be quick. My hands were shaking as I carried it. I stepped through the tall grass, going down to a small hill to the open road. It would be just far enough to be out of my husband's sight, and I would be gone before anyone saw me. I think it finally figured out that I knew, because it started struggling. In a few seconds, it would be swallowed by a sea of cars and race down the freeway at 7 miles per hour. It would be gone forever. I was about to do the unthinkable when I saw its face turning red. It struggled, cried, coughed, and began shaking. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized it wasn't struggling to get out of my arms, but struggling to breathe. I ripped off his little jumper to see his chest covered in red spots and blisters. His veins turned purple and his eyes opened wide. I screamed in horror as I realized I'd made a mistake. Drew was having an allergic reaction. Whoa, hold on a second. You guys, she thought she was taking an entity, but she gave her son the strawberry and he's having an allergic reaction. Oh my God, okay, let's continue. At that moment, I felt 2 cold hands around my neck. It was Nicholas. I screamed for my life, kicked him as hard as I could for what felt like an eternity until I finally found a weak spot. He let out a scream and fell to the ground. I reached for the first rock I could find at the side of the road and started beating him in the face, ignoring his cries for help. It was him all along. "You monster," I screamed. "You made me kill my own child, my baby." I kept beating him until I didn't recognize him anymore. Then everything turned black. My eyelids felt very heavy. I heard a constant beeping noise in the background, which made the excruciating headache I was experiencing even worse. I struggled to remember what happened, but I recognized the smell of my surroundings immediately. I was in a hospital. I overheard a conversation by the side of my bed as I kept my eyes closed. Witness told me he saw everything. She was trying to kill a child, toss him onto the road. A man had followed her. He tried to stop her, hold her back. She went crazy and started beating him. Witness hit her with his car, said he didn't know what else to do. Me and Jason were called down to investigate. Turned out the baby had already choked to death. Cause of death looks like an allergic reaction, but given the circumstances, she probably poisoned him and was there to get rid of the body. No one knows what her intentions were. Must be sick in the head. Man that was beaten to death turned out to be your husband. And this was their child? No, that's the strange part. The baby isn't yet identified. We thought it was theirs until the patient's mother called up to 10 minutes ago. She was hysterical, told us her daughter's only child had been with her for 3 days. On top of that, the family's residence was burning down while all of this went down. Either done to destroy evidence or the first out of 3 heartbreaking attempts to murder a child. Either way, we're taking her once she wakes up. She won't ever be allowed to come near her child again. But that was not my child. And as I realized the terrible mistake I've made, I tried to fall back asleep and prayed in silence that I would never wake up again. Okay. Whoa. That story gave me like more chills than I could even imagine. I think it's so insane that when this happened with her child, she beat her husband thinking that it had inhabited her husband instead of the child, when meanwhile, it had been with her mother this whole entire time, and now it would remain with her mother and it's not even her child. What do you guys personally think of this story? I think that it was so well written. It kept me hooked. It freaked me out beyond belief. And honestly, it makes me question everything because demonic possession is really no joke. And to think that anything like that could happen is just so creepy to me. What do you guys think is gonna happen to the child now that the child is with the mother, like the grandmother? Do you think it's just gonna grow up its life as this demon, or what do you guys think is gonna occur? Make sure you let me know in the comments below what you guys think, because I wanna hear all of your possible theories, but that is it for today's story. Like I said, you guys, I have a link to the original story down in my description, so feel free to check it out and read it by yourselves as well. I just had to bring this on here and talk about it with you guys because it freaked me out so badly when I saw the title and I was like, I need to read this on my channel and react to it with the Reese's Pieces. Well, you guys, that is it for today's video. If you are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my videos, make sure you go ahead and click that subscribe button. I'm uploading every single day, so you definitely don't want to miss when I do upload. And please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. It makes my heart super, super, super happy when you guys do that, so please do that. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness, and until tomorrow, I love you guys.